Welcome to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me is a man that is about to go on a really messed up tour. It's Niall Moore. How you doing?
I'm pretty good, Mark.
I love that line. Obviously, I didn't say it for PG-13 reasons, but I love that scene. Like, what kind of messed up tour is this? I love that line so much. You know, in the commentary, Michael Bay said that he just would put the camera on the actors, the random like the extras that were there, or paid actors that were featured, and he would just have them say weird lines. And then that came out of that.
Yeah, just have them say random crap.
Yeah. And that's I don't know. It just seems like a very Michael Bay thing to say in a Michael Bay movie back in '96, because his movies now are littered with comments like that.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I haven't watched much of his stuff recently, but, I'd say The Rock is probably his best movie, to be honest. Like,
oh, yeah. I mean, what would it go up against? 13 Hours, Pain and Gain, the first Transformers?
Was Armageddon him?
Oh, yeah, Armageddon, Bad Boys 2, the Transformers movies, The Island.
Like, there are a few in there that are good, but I don't think any of them are classics like The Rock is. Like, this movie is so ridiculously quotable.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a group chat with some of my buddies the other day, and I was like, oh, I'm watching The Rock because I'm going to be doing a podcast on it. And it just denigrated into, like, this, like, stream of quotes from the movie.
Yeah.
And it was just like, take great pleasure in gutting you, boy. And it's like,
like, peach sorbet persuasion. Which is the weirdest line ever. But, I got to tell you, I agree with you. I think this is Michael Bay's best movie. I own the VHS, I own the DVD, and then I lost it, now I have the Blu-ray. But this movie, it's kind of at that time where there's still a lot in camera. This isn't super, like, it's just an old school machine gun, capable people killing capable people film. And it just hits so well because you have really good villains, right? You have what, Ed Harris, who's the antagonist, but then he sort of gets pushed aside for Fry and Barrow, right? And then because they're the people that become the main villains. It's a really interesting, layered. Like, you never know that Michael Biehn's just going to get wiped out in the first hour of this movie.
You see him as like the Navy SEAL leader. Like, you expect he's going to be like the guy teaming up with Connery and Nicolas Cage to, like, save the day, right? Because he's a big name.
Yeah, big names. And then they just get wiped out. And then you get Nick Cage, who, he had done Kiss of Death and he had a chase scene in Raising Arizona, but this was his introduction into the action world. And
it's just before Con Air or after?
Yeah, this is what kicked it off. He did this,
right,
and then he did
Con Air and Face Off.
Con Air and Face Off, because he shot them back to back, Con Air and Face Off, when he did that. Yeah. But I mean, he was hot off leaving Las Vegas, and he had done like Guarding Tess, movies like that. And then here he is but I think this is a good introduction to Super Cage, because in this movie, he's the chemical expert. He works for the FBI. He's a rock star. He knows how to defuse bombs. He knows how to drive Ferraris, motorcycles. What?
Speaks Latin.
Yeah, exactly. So it's an interesting hero, right? And we talked about this on Twitter, Niall, where he's the nerd in this movie, but he also drives Ferrari. Like, he's also like a super stud. It's an interesting dynamic that his character has.
It's like the 90s action trope. It's like the hero with zero training whatsoever can in fact do everything. It's like, the Matrix actually shows them having to upload how to fly a helicopter into their brains. Mm-hmm. In other movies, they can do it. Of course, it's like, oh, that's a helicopter. Yeah, of course I can fly that. No bother. Yeah.
I love that shorthand in movies nowadays. I was watching San Andreas with Dwayne Johnson, and in the beginning, he flies a helicopter into this cavern, rescues somebody. And then later on, he steals that helicopter, which probably could have saved many people during this earthquake, and he saves his life. But then it crashes, and then he ends up in a plane, but then he ends up in a boat, and then he finds another vehicle, and he just flies everything known to man in that movie. They just know how. And it just reminded me a lot of Nick Cage in this movie, just grabbing dirt bikes, Ferraris.
Of course you know how to do it. Yeah, of course he has experience driving a high-powered rear-wheel drive sports car over the hills of San Francisco.
Yeah.
Like, that's not easy terrain. It's not, that car is not designed for those hills. In reality, he would have knocked the front bumper off the first hill he went down. He basically would have hit the bottom and smashed the front is gone.
Yeah.
The
And
suspension would have been shot.
it's such a, but it's beautiful though, right? And Michael Bay in the commentary, he didn't quite love, he hated shooting in San Francisco. He's like, the amount of permits that you have to pull. I've done events in San Francisco. It's miserable pulling all the permits out there. But they had a 2-block radius. He said an entire army of people. And so they shot on Alcatraz. They brought a crane out there, generators, miles of cable. They loaded that entire national park monument with gear, and they didn't get behind schedule. It was when they shot in San Francisco, the car chase, that he got behind schedule. It's kind of funny. I don't know if you read this. You might have read this, but he got behind, and he had to go to a meeting with the producers to get yelled at. And Sean Connery was like, "Hey, I'll come with you," and because he's like, "Screw that, you're doing the best you can." So he walked into a meeting with Sean Connery.
Sean Connery was like, "Look, he's doing fine."
Yeah, he said that. Yeah, he's like, "Give him more money." Like he just so he stuck up for Michael Bay in that. Yeah. But I love that you have the gunfights, you have the rockets, you have these wonderful sets built with these little tracks that are on there and like 40-foot drops in the water. I mean, there were some beautiful sets in that, but that didn't set the production back. It was shooting on the streets of San Francisco, which makes me kind of happy. But this movie, I'm really happy that you recommended this, and I'm happy that I bought the Blu-ray, because this gave me a wonderful insight into Michael Bay's brain. And what I realized was that Michael Bay just has a great idea of who to sell a movie to. Like, when you make a movie, you better know who to sell it to. You better know your audience. You better add things for them. And so in the commentary, I mean, this is back in the 90s when they recorded it for the Criterion Laserdisc, which is amazing.
Old school.
Back in the 90s, he just talked about being a commercial filmmaker. And what he said was, you make these movies, you make a $60 million movie and it's not a hit, they're not going to give you $60 million again. So they gave him $75 million for The Rock, and he's like, I made sure that I made a movie for an audience, a worldwide audience. I wanted to make this car chases, explosions, good people, like directing. He just seems to get what audiences want. And that great evidence of that is the Transformers franchise.
Well, yeah. That is, you've got, the toys, you've got Meg Fox in skimpy outfits.
Yep.
It's like, there you go, teenage boys, sorted.
And that's what he said. He said, I make movies for teenagers. That's what he said. And the results, right? And he also understands foreign box office. Because if you look at the amount of money that Transformers Age of Extinction took in China.
That meant stupid money.
Yeah, I mean, it pulled in. You were in Korea at the time when it came out. Yeah. Do you remember? Like, did Korean audiences go to that movie a lot?
Not so much. It was kind of lost its audience in Korea a little bit. But got it. Yeah, it played big.
And he gets it. I mean, there's over 1 billion people in that country. So if you can connect with those audiences, you're going to keep making movies. You're going to make 300 million, 400 million, 500 million from them. So it's, while people were making fun of Michael Bay for his Transformer movies, they're clearing $1 billion worldwide. So it's
obviously working, right?
Yeah. I mean, he gets it. Michael Bay got to start in music videos. So he directed, Aerosmith, big bombastic films, and he got to start in Bad Boys. He got Will Smith, and he made Will Smith and Martin Lawrence action stars too. I mean, Will Smith's career changed.
Like Bad Boy, that was before Independence Day, wasn't it?
That was 95, and then he did that. So Will Smith said, there's a really funny thing about working with Michael Bay. It's Ed Harris had some interesting stuff to say about Michael Bay on the commentary too. Jeez Louise. Will Smith said, he's the one who made me into an action hero. So he made Bad Boys hyper stylized, and then, I mean, this is his second feature. $75 million. You have Nick Cage, Oscar winner, Sean Connery, Ed Harris, huge cast, and it sounded like he never got overwhelmed by it. So it
just sounds like, as he said, he knew who he was selling to and what marks he needed to hit to sell it.
Yeah, and he fought hard for scene. So the scene where the Navy SEALs are taking the submarines into the rock, those are all puppets. Did you know that? That's animatronic puppets.
Oh, really?
Yeah, those are miniatures.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there's a thing on the Blu-ray about doing that. So he fought for so much authenticity in this, and it's pretty interesting. Ed Harris was talking about working with him, and Ed Harris also worked with James Cameron, who was incredibly difficult on set. But he's always on set, James Cameron. He's in the muck with you, which I love. But Ed Harris was talking to Michael Bay. He's like, you don't have to be like James Cameron. He's like, James Cameron's, in his word, he's like, Cameron's kind of an asshole. He's like, you don't have to be like him. You don't have to be a tough guy. And Ed Harris said that Michael Bay's actually really nice and sensitive, but on set he likes to yell and be the general. And if you watch Bad Boys 2 behind the scenes clips, he's yelling. So he's just a big general on these sets. But he gets huge names. He had Frances McDormand in a Transformers movie. So actors must love working with him because of his style. Like, what people come back to.
I guess a lot of it is, the way he does stylized action is, you can instantly watch a movie and be like, oh, is this a Michael Bay movie? Just the way the action is like framed and it's like bombastic and there are explosions everywhere. That stylized kind of action is something, it's somewhat of a lost art really with the explosion to, digital effects everywhere. Like he still uses a lot of practical effects where possible as far as I've seen. Well, I haven't seen the most recent Transformers, which are obviously quite effect heavy.
That last one boggles my mind. I watched it and it just exhausted me. I just felt, what just happened there?
I think the last one I watched with Leonard Nimoy, and then I was like, all right, yeah.
But in between that, right? He made 13 Hours. Pain and Gain's a good movie. Pain and Gain's nasty. That's a nihilistic little movie right there. You got Dwayne Johnson grilling hands. Like, that's a bonkers fest. So he's seeing. You know what I like about Michael Bay, and this is what Nicolas Cage said about him, is that Bay sort of has a weird edge to him. His humor in his movies are very specific.
Yeah.
And they're kind of weird. Like, he has a weird sense of humor, doesn't he?
Yeah, definitely. Like, there are a lot of, little throwaway, like, some visual gags, some kind of, not so visual, like the just throwaway lines. Like, did we really need to see the hula dancer at the start getting set on fire? That was kind of...
Yeah, he's just I love it. I love that he just had this... I don't know. Even in this movie, there are some really cheeky lines in it. But...
Oh, yeah.
Like when the guy's going down with his streetcar, he's like, save yourself!
Oh, Lordy, save us!
He's like, I'm going to kill that guy. But what's interesting, too, is the more I read about The Rock, there's about 6 different writers. There's a lot of producers who had skin in the game. Nick Cage rewrote all of his roles. Sean Connery had a guy come in and rewrite his roles. They had Aaron Sorkin working on the script. They say Quentin Tarantino did some work on the script.
Yeah.
You just have... You have...
Carrie... Oh.
Yeah, Carrie, they brought in everybody for rewrites. We talked about Last Action Hero about rewrites, and now we're talking about The Rock with rewrites. But in the end, it still feels like it's a movie. It's a film. It's a classic action film. There's some really great beats.
The thing is, like, if you look at it, you've got almost 2 separate stories. Like, if you could take out this entire half of the movie, which is the Ed Harris story, and it's like this tragic fall where he's basically, he goes to his wife's grave, he's like stealing the rockets, he's like going up against the government, and he's trying to like, do right by all the men who died under his control until like the mercenaries eventually mutiny and, he ends up dying. Like, that's like his tragic story.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got the other side, which is the FBI who are trying to stop Ed Harris from, being a terrorist.
They take a guy who's been in prison for 20 years, get him out, get him a haircut. The world's about to blow up, and they take him to a wonderful hotel. And that string, Womack's arm, that string that is attached to his arm is incredibly strong, Niall. Whoever makes that string, or rope, shower rope, I want to hire. Because Womack...
I'd say he's easily pushing to 20 to 40.
Yeah, with the pressure of falling. And also another thing I love about this movie, and I promise you all this isn't going to be a giant love fest, but it is too, because I love this movie. But I like in the first 20 minutes, you have some interesting things established. So in the beginning, that General Hummel is doing an exercise, and they go in and steal the gas. They let one